AMD right now is all about that cash. No, not that. Well, that too, since they're making bank on the Ryzen processors, but what I'm talking about right now is cache memory. Unified cache has been one of the biggest driving factors behind the massive performance improvement for the Ryzen 5000 series. And from what we have seen, it seems like unified cache might have a very interesting role to play in the new Radeon GPUs as well. Hey guys, Amar here from C4eTech, and today we are taking a look at the Radeon RX 6800XT. So before I jump into the benchmarks, let me give you guys a little bit of a backstory as to why I'm so excited for these new AMD cards. Well, for a long while, AMD Radeon has not been competitive in the higher echelons of the graphics card market. Yes, in the budget and mid-range, they have competed and they have some very good products. But when it comes to the high-end, Nvidia has been unrivaled. Well, not anymore, because with the new 6800 series of GPUs, AMD is taking the fight directly to Nvidia's 3000 series. So how did it perform? Let's take a look at Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Everything turned all the way up, resolution set at 1080p. And we can see that the AMD 6800XT slots nicely in between the 3070 and the 3090. We don't really have a 3080 here in our studios for comparison, but going by AMD's claims, the Radeon 6800XT should basically provide stiff competition to the RTX 3080. By the way guys, if you're liking the PC coverage on the channel and want some PC content delivered straight to your inbox, then please consider subscribing to C4eTech and hitting that bell icon so that you get to be a part of our notification squad. Now, what's interesting here is that along with the RTX 3000 series cards, we can also turn on ray tracing on our Radeon 6800XT. Yes, AMD is finally bringing ray tracing support to their latest generation of cards, and it looks absolutely stellar. Of course, this wasn't that big of a surprise since these new cards are based on the RDNA 2 architecture. Yep, the exact same architecture that the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S GPUs are based on. So yeah, since the consoles have already been shown to have real-time ray tracing capabilities, it was kind of a given that the RX 6800XT would do so as well. When it comes to the 3000 series cards, we have the second generation RT cores in them. The Radeon equivalent of it are called ray accelerators. This is one of the newest dedicated hardware that we have seen being introduced with RDNA 2. With AMD having put one RA or ray accelerator for every compute unit on their cards. So now that might raise the question, what is a compute unit? Well, a bunch of stream processors make up one compute unit. For example, the 6800XT comes with 72 compute units and 72 RAs, while the 6800 comes with 60 of both. So of course, the next logical question, what in hell is stream processors then? Well, with Nvidia cards, we have CUDA cores. They are the basic building blocks of a GPU. For Radeon cards, we have stream processors. The 6800XT has 4608 stream processors, while the 6800 has 3840. As for the 3000 series cards, here they are on the screen. Now, the number of CUDA cores are obviously more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Nvidia cards are better. We can't directly compare CUDA cores to stream processors, so that's why we have the benchmarks. Now, I did tell you guys that cache plays a big role in RDNA 2, so let's explore that a bit as well. With these new GPUs, AMD introduces Infinity Cache. Now, to my layman knowledge, it looks and feels a lot like Infinity Fabric, but instead of for Ryzen processors, it's made for RDNA 2 GPUs. Functionality wise, they're both much the same. Both the 6800 and the 6800XT comes with 128 megabytes of onboard high-speed cache. AMD says it can provide up to 3.25 times the bandwidth of 256-bit GDDR6. Now the memory improvements don't just stop there. Both cards are also equipped with 16 gigs of GDDR6 memory. That's twice the memory of the last gen 5700XT. And this time, it's got a 512 Gbps bandwidth as well. Oh yes, the new generation of Radeon cards brings along support for PCIe 4.0 as well, And one thing that I'd like to point out here is that Nvidia has moved ahead to GDDR6X for the 3080 and 3090, which leads to higher bus speeds. On the other side, the Radeon 6800, which is going up against the RTX 3070, well, both of them have 256-bit bus and GDDR6 memory. And based on today's benchmarks, the extra 8 gigs of memory on the 6800 should end up giving it quite a big advantage on the 3070. Especially when gaming at higher resolutions. So we have talked quite a bit about the cache as well as the dedicated VRAM on both these new graphics cards. But AMD has still one more ace up their sleeve. When paired with a Ryzen 5000 series processor and a 500 series motherboard, these new GPUs can utilize something AMD is calling Smart Access Memory, or SAM for short. What does that mean? Traditionally, Windows PCs have only been able to access 256 megabytes of the GPU VRAM, creating a data bottleneck. Well, now the new Ryzen CPUs can access all the GPU VRAM directly using the full bandwidth of the PCI 4.0 interface. Now, we weren't able to test it out for ourselves. We have the necessary hardware here, but at the time of embargo, our board didn't have a relevant BIOS update available. But AMD says this alone should net us somewhere up to a 6% improvement in games. For those playing at 4K, that 6% might sometimes mean the difference between just overcoming the 60 frames per second barrier or slipping under it. So that's one really interesting feature that we'd like to see more of in the future. So these are some of the most interesting hardware features that RDNA 2 is bringing to the table. But of course, underneath the hood, there are more improvements like DirectX ray tracing, mesh shaders, sampler feedback, variable rate shading, but all these features, they're more geared towards game developers than gamers. So I'll skip out on those. Instead, I'll focus more on what you or I care about, like the temperatures and of course the power consumption. So the recommended power supply for a 6800XT is the 750 watt, and for the 6800, that's 650 watts. As for the parts themselves, they can consume a maximum of 300 watts for the 6800 XT and 250 watts for the 6800. So quite a bit lower when compared to the RTX 3000 series cards, which can go all the way up to 350 watts. As for temperatures, we played Red Dead Redemption 2 for a while, and the temps, well, they shot up quite a bit with a maximum temperature of around 80 degrees Celsius. That being said, AMD did mention that temperatures up to 110 degrees Celsius is normal, and that was how the RX 6800 XT has been clocked right out of the box. As for our card, it's a reference card with triple fans. We have 2 DisplayPort outs, 1 HDMI, and a Type-C port for VR. Normal stuff. It's a beefy card, that's for certain, but unlike Nvidia, they have not opted for a special power connector even in the reference cards. The 6800 XT has a bit of overhang, making the reference design a 2.5 slot card, while the 6800 is smaller and only occupies 2 PCI slots. As for the test bench, we are using a Ryzen 3950X at stock speeds along with 32 gigs of 3600 MHz DDR4 RAM. All of this is installed on an X570 motherboard from MSI. As for the GPUs, we have the Radeon 6800 XT Reference Edition, the Gigabyte RTX 3070 Gaming OC Edition, the Gigabyte RTX 3090 Eagle OC, and the Aorus 2080 Ti Extreme. So a lot of the talk till now has been centered around the hardware, and well, that's awesome because RDNA 2 is the first big leap in GPU technology that we have seen from AMD in a long while. But one of the biggest issues with Radeon cards has been their driver support, and that is something we'll have to wait and see how it works out in the future. As for our press release drivers, well, they did seem to be pretty stable, and we didn't notice any weird glitches or crashes in our test suite of benchmarks and games. Also, now that we are talking about software, there are some nifty little features that AMD have built into Adrenalin 2020. We have 3 different presets under the performance tuning options: Silent, Balanced, and Rage, the latter applying a slight overclock right out of the box. Then there's Radeon Anti-Lag, that's specific to reducing the latency, especially in first-person shooters like Apex Legends and FORTNITE. To be fair, this is something not exclusive to AMD, even Nvidia has their ultra-low latency mode. The advantage in latency is something that can probably only be felt by esport players and professionals. However, Radeon anti-lag as well as their dynamic resolution scaling is all part of AMD's effort to bring high frame rates to Twitch shooters so that gamers have that lag-free seamless experience. Bundled together, all of this is known as Radeon Boost. But what if you don't care much about frame rates? Maybe you are an RPG player and you would care more about the visual fidelity than, let's say, hundreds of frames a second. Well, AMD has thought of that as well. AMD's Fidelity FX is basically their answer to Nvidia's DLSS. They work in much the same way, sharpening up visuals, adding reflections and ambient occlusion, in simple terms, making our game look a lot better. Unfortunately though, it's up to the developers to implement these features in their games. So how well Fidelity FX does depends entirely on which game devs decide to support it and how it's implemented in their game. And honestly, that has been an Achilles heel for AMD for a long while now. We have had unique features being introduced in AMD cards that have not been taken much advantage of because the reality has been that Nvidia has dominated the GPU market, which is why Team Green's features have seen more mass implementation by the developers. Well, looks like AMD is in a position to challenge that with the AMD 6800 series. We do not have India specific pricing yet, but in the US, the 6800 and 6800XT are priced at $579 and $649 respectively, while the 3080 goes for $699 and the 3070 for $499. So at $50 cheaper than the 3080, the RX 6800XT offers a pretty good bang for the buck experience, and it makes me even more excited for the 6900XT when it eventually does launch later this year. As for whether you guys should go for the 3070 or 3080 or go Team Red with 6800 or 6800XT, well, a lot depends on the price and also the resolution you are gonna game at. If you're aiming for 1080p, the 3070 might still be the most bang for the buck card. For 1440p and 4K gamers, the extra VRAM on the 6800 might prove to be very useful. So for this video, we have shown you guys the converted pricing from US dollars for the Radeon cards. But as soon as we come to know of the actual Indian pricing, we will update it in the pinned comment down below. And personally, what I'm most happy about is that after many years, AMD is finally being competitive in the GPU space. So we have great options from both Team Red as well as Team Green. So which side will you choose? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, we come to the end of this video. As always, like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon if you haven't yet. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.